Hello everyone. I suppose I did forget to announce it in a post, but yes, I did intend for today to also have a live stream going on. Yeah, just gonna take a few minutes, look at a few charts before we actually start. I do have a list, some of them I actually did go through yesterday, but not exactly all of them. And we can maybe also take a look at a few requests if we have the time. So, even as an intro, I do want to warn that across the market, I do see the risk of several stocks potentially forming larger corrections. Not necessarily major tops, but we could be getting into the region of building such a correction that might take a bit longer to materialize than we have had in the last couple of weeks, especially considering some movements like this or even what we have seen on the Micron chart, right? We are looking still at significantly higher prices today, and there is still the chance that this yellow structure might be materializing, that we would be building an immensely more consistent, more substantial move to the upside than what we would have been considering for the white interpretation. But it is the time to be a bit more cautious, in my opinion. It is the time to maybe secure some of these profits with a stop loss, if nothing more. Yeah, let's go. Everyone is here, or supposedly everyone. Yeah, let's start with Charter Communications. So this is actually a stock I've done a video on a while ago. And even now, it is rather early to necessarily look for a bottom here, but the long-term structure still stands strong. I do see an initial 5V move to the upside in one way or the other, and I do see a 3-wave correction down into the white support zone. So technically the correction is done, right? Except there is no strong sign of a bottom. We can notice that even the ideal target for the wave C has just been achieved. We could theoretically have a bottoming, but it is still too early to tell. Then if I go into the smallest of timeframes, as for this chart at the very least, I would argue that 5 waves down are complete. Even this 5th wave down seems overwhelmingly complete in a sense that I would have probably internally something like a 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 5. I actually have even too many waves 5 for how many 1, 2 setups I have internally. I wouldn't dare to go too much into an even smaller time frame, but it is possible to already start considering a bottom. By the way, do you see the correct chart? I'm not sure. Do you see Charter Communications right now? Yeah. Good. Then, as I have shared even yesterday, the software stocks are interesting to consider in the relatively near term. In the next few weeks, we could be looking. This is a live stream for stocks that aren't necessarily looking at opportunities today, but rather what I would have normally focused on for the newsletter, as I won't be able to do a newsletter for this month, but I will do this. So yeah, then software stocks, many of them could be looking for a more substantial bottom relatively soon, because the structure down across most of them actually seems to prefer even lower. And even today, this trend continues. We see even further downside, but I am looking possibly in the next even 1 to 2 weeks to actually see at least the move down, at least the countdown full. So it's not that leading to such a moment, building that 5 waves structure down would mean that a bottom is in. But that is when I would actually start looking for a potential opportunity. Yeah, so pretty much the same structure I am tracking on Adobe. It is actually a bit worrying how large this move down has been, but I wouldn't let that cloud my judgment. I do believe looking for a bottom would be possible, and even though it's seen more decline than pretty much all of the other software stocks, at least relatively, it would have the same odds of having a bottom, of forming a bottom at these points in time when we start to see the reversal across the sector. Wall Street, not a big fan of software stocks right now. AI is going to replace all of them, isn't it? Well, I'm not so sure. I believe we are just looking at an extended correction rather. Then, what else? We are going to do Oracle. This is actually one of the more interesting ones in my opinion. It hasn't built this wave 4 into the last level of support. It hasn't used up the support levels, the structural support it has formed in this structure down. I believe looking for these levels to offer that support when it is necessary could be a very interesting opportunity, and not even necessarily to buy the falling knife, not necessarily to buy as this structure will be pushing to these lows, but maybe we notice a bounce once they are reached, once these levels are achieved, and maybe we notice some sideways trading. Even if the structure is awful, I believe there may be a good chance of looking for a more substantial bottom in this area. Yeah, what else? I am also looking for the energy sector, more specifically the energy storage sector. As we have already seen, many of the energy stocks generate pretty good returns over the last few months, yeah, probably even more than that. And Bloom Energy is probably a perfect example of that. Even most recently, I have shared a setup here. But it is heading towards a more substantial top, and even here, I believe an opportunity will become apparent once we actually complete this leg up. We will be looking for the large wave 4 correction, but what I'm also considering is, or are stocks multi 1-2s on Oracle? No, I actually would rather consider an ending diagonal in the case of Oracle. The structure wouldn't be too ideal for a series of 1-2 setups. Then, yeah, so energy storage, Fluence Energy. This is one of the opportunities I have shared a while ago on YouTube. I have been considering the possibility of a wave 2 in yellow, considering that, yes, this as a leading diagonal would have a top in place. The structure is not perfect, to be honest. I might actually even be able to consider that it would be an extended wave 3 in an impulse. I don't like that interpretation too much either, but what is interesting here is rather that I might be able to track a leading diagonal within the smallest of timeframes where, sure, this could have been a wave B top. It did get rejected quite religiously from even these levels of resistance. I could also track, especially if I go into a smaller time frame, something like 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I could look actually for a potential 1-2 setup in this region to offer us another opportunity before we head to significantly higher prices, because either Oh my god, this is lagging a lot. I'm not sure what's happening. But yeah, either we see in the bullish interpretation, in the bullish structure where we have a bottom in, either we see an extension of this yellow wave 1, acceptable, or we potentially see a 1-2, which would imply a double 1-2 setup, where a wave 3 could lead to massively higher prices. So there is opportunity here. We can start looking for the levels of support, and I haven't shared the levels of support for Bloom Energy, for example, a moment ago, because I don't have the top in within the wave 5, but here I would strongly prefer for the top to be in within this interpretation if we are to indeed form a 1-2 setup here. So yes, direct upside is possible, but I would still primarily expect to reach at least $20.70. ASPI, yes, we can take a look at it, but a bit later. Let's actually go through some more of these opportunities I have prepared today first. So, EOS Energy Enterprises. This is actually another one that can be quite interesting. Now, same story here, similar structure, at least from a larger time frame perspective. I can track a wave 1 to the upside complete. A wave 2 could theoretically be in. I have an ABC pattern down. It is probably even more apparent than what I have on the Fluence Energy stock. But it also has the opportunity to extend lower. I can track 3 waves up in what has happened within this structure, but the interesting part here is I can also track 5 waves up in this yellow wave 1. I can consider an impulse to have taken place where in that scenario I have 3 waves down, a wave 2 correction, so especially as long as the current lows are still holding down to the 61.8% retracement, it could have a bottom in. So this opportunity might be more for the next week or two rather than the next weeks towards the end of July, let's say. So yes, I am actually looking at this with good interest. Not so great since the internal structure, yeah, it's not very convincing. I only see 3 waves to the upside. I certainly cannot trust this too much as a 5-wave pattern. So if it manages to maybe build something like a 5-wave move at this point, in which case I would probably prefer a lower low within the wave 4. But yeah, I would prefer that additional high. Sorry, I got distracted. I was reading Fluence Energy. What is my preferred scenario? It's actually difficult. Difficult to say. I don't spend too much time thinking which scenario is the slightly more likely one. If I see strong indications of one scenario being more likely than the other, then I am more likely to note those things. But as it stands right now, it will depend a lot more on the market conditions, on where the market is headed, and volume can be a good indication for that, than which scenario I find more likely, because I believe either of these scenarios would have pretty similar odds. It will ultimately depend on the market, and right now the money is still primarily following the semiconductor stocks. Yeah, pretty much all of them are still within massive uptrends, and pretty much all of them are likely looking to extend even higher, even Intel. Yeah, even today it's actually done wonderful. It's at a 4% increase, and it's not shown signs of weakness yet, signs of a top, even though I would have liked to see a wave 2 correction at this point. So yeah, I would primarily be waiting for the signal, then blindly follow one scenario just because it looks a little bit better. Because if I were to pick and choose, I would like the orange scenario to play out. I would like a better 3-wave move down. I would like a more clear wave 2 bottom, and even in terms of proportions, yeah, I would like a larger correction. Or at the very least, that this would have been an extension of the wave 1 and then we get the wave 2. I'm not too satisfied with what we have in place for the wave 2, but that doesn't matter to the market. Alright, where was I actually? Yeah, so EOS Energy. I would like to see here a similar pattern with what we have on different stocks, but on a smaller scale. 5 waves up, then another opportunity, another 1-2 setup would be very interesting to be had, but even without it, since we have a clear 3-wave pattern down, I actually believe this could be a pretty compelling opportunity, especially for the investor kind. So, next one. Similar story, massive move up already happened. I am looking for one additional high, as if I were to pick and choose the counts, this one I would like actually to see form one more high. And I do want to check for a moment. Yeah, ARM is still dropping. I do want to take a look at it before it forms a more substantial bottom, but there is great risk here of dropping much further actually. There is also a great opportunity to be had in that, but yeah. So yeah, Enphase Energy. This one has broken the levels of resistance I would have really liked to not have broken. I am looking at this structure to have ideally formed a 5-wave move down. That didn't happen. Well, what am I looking at now is a 3-wave move up, as I only have 3 waves up within this structure, so I would at the very least like to see 5 waves within the wave C. We have broken levels of resistance, so before we actually take a look internally, I do want to highlight that I can look for the next levels of resistance. I could theoretically look for this to build even an ending diagonal within the white wave C. So I would still be wary of the 61.8% retracement, which, even though has been broken, it's not a very significant one. So especially if we cannot form this next high in white, I would be cautious of dismissing completely the possibility of even lower prices. Now, with that said, for this wave 5 in white, we have a pretty compelling trade setup because invalidation is right below us. Right now it's trading at $53.50. Well, if it breaks below $47.70, and we could actually have a stop loss even higher than that, but if it breaks below those levels, it will most likely end up being a failure, at least within this idea of a wave 5. Could it still build higher prices if it fails to hold this white area of support, this white support zone? Definitely, but I would have to see evidence to actually trust it. So yeah, I was actually tracking this as an opportunity even before it formed this last low. The structure was suggesting one additional low to be preferable, and I was tracking that. Interestingly enough, it did manage to generate that additional low exactly as I would have wanted it, without breaking, without getting the sustained break at the very least, below the 50% retracement. So I do still have to allow it a chance to prove itself getting this wave 5. Now, what target do we have for this wave 5? It's not going to be the most targeted target. We can have a more generic area for the wave 5, but it's always a bit more difficult to get the ideal target for those. But a general area I'd be watching would be here around $83, the 61.8% extension of the entire move up. Normally, I'd be looking for the 38.2% extension, but given that it is below the wave 3 top, yeah, most likely it will have to be the next target, the 61.8% extension. And what about Nasdaq, S&P? Yeah, I will get to those, but right now we are more focused. We are watching more of the opportunities that I have prepared for the next month, the next weeks, the next month to be considered. I do expect that some of these might not give the opportunity we share here today in the presented time, in the time frame of July, but we could see it happen, and if it happens a little bit later, so be it. We do have the setup that we are tracking in place. So this is actually interesting if it forms one more high for right now with this area of support in white. If it fails, well, if we get that additional low in this white wave 2, that would be an interesting opportunity, and this could happen, I believe, possibly in the span of July. This might actually take a bit longer. This is one example of those opportunities that might take a bit longer. Now, let's do a 3 or 4 more, and then we will get to the requests, right? So, firstly, Centrus Energy is probably one of my preferred setups that we have in the market right now. For this stock, I have been tracking this idea of a wave 4 correction for quite some time now. I have first identified this opportunity, when it was probably trading around this area, right? I would have even considered, I wasn't following it closely, but I would have considered a possible bottom here. I got busy with other stocks, looked at other opportunities, and the next time I noticed it was when I saw a potential of a bottom in the nuclear sector. The nuclear sector was starting to suggest some initial 5 waves to the upside. Well, this has failed. The setup didn't work out. But I can still look for this as a white wave 4 to have formed a complete 3-wave pattern down, reaching the 50% retracement. With this level being reached and having the bounce, even if it got a break below it, it wasn't sustained. But having reached the full potential of the wave 4 area of support and seeing the bounce is a strong degree of confirmation where I know that I do desperately want this level, this last low around $145 to be holding. I would be watching out for, especially today since we have seen a stronger decline, but I would be watching out for an opportunity possibly this week, possibly in the next couple of weeks, I do not know exactly, to form a bottom within this white wave 2. Is this necessary? No, but I actually find it to be more likely than this idea of white I have been tracking since, yeah, today's price action not favorable for a bottom within this as a wave 2 and for the wave 3 to actually be ongoing. It is much more indicative of the leading diagonal I was considering a possibility within this yellow wave 1. So yes, I would consider primarily this yellow area of support, with the first level being at $172.50. Now, personally, I'm not sure I would wait for the complete wave 2 to have the most clear 3-wave correction down before looking for an opportunity here. I have actually already bought this stock as it was recovering initially. But the thing is, I do not know that it will follow through these expectations exactly. I haven't removed this white count where the wave 1 would have topped here and the wave 2 would have bottomed here, where the wave 3 could be ongoing. I do still believe it is technically possible, so for that reason, positioning, just so you don't feel like you're missing out, might not be a bad idea. Yeah, so next one, what do I have here? What else? All right, yeah, I have 3 more. Coinbase, actually 4 more. I do want to cover Bitcoin as well, just to give a broader update of what we could typically expect. Coinbase, I have also shared yesterday. I was doing a member live stream yesterday. I don't know how these will unfold in the future, if I will do more live streams, if they will be for members only, or how they would be. It depends on how it works out, but yeah, Coinbase, a very interesting opportunity. Primarily, I have to consider that this would be building a 5V move down. And I have been even asked yesterday, can this not be the wave C to actually complete the bottom of the wave 2? And it can. Yeah, definitely, I do see the possibility of this wave 2 bottoming within this structure down, but I would strongly prefer within all interpretations for this move down to actually come. But that's not the interesting part. The interesting part is that we can look for a bottom within this wave 5, within the wave C, doesn't really matter. But once the bottom is in, I am looking for signals of a reversal. Maybe an initial 5V move to the upside, that would be ideal. Maybe I just see momentum picking up rather strongly, and yeah, we just start moving higher and higher, forming consistently forming higher highs and higher lows while building this pattern in a rather slow manner. We might see some high increases of volume as the buying occurs. For example, what has happened in this move to the upside. And we look for those signals. I do not know if we will get the wave C or the wave 5, but we should have an idea. We might get some pretty strong clues, as within the blue wave 5, I expect only 3 waves down, while in a wave C, if I get 5 waves down, well, that would be a marvelous indicator of a bottom being in, of a potential wave 2 in yellow having the low in. Then let's move on to Bitcoin. So for this one, yeah, we had an attempt to form something more interesting, something potentially more bullish. An initial 5V move to the upside even, but no. It's failed. After 3 waves up, we have already formed a marginally lower low, and right now, it is still very much in resistance. I might have considered an impulse to still be a decent likelihood for this structure, but given that we have moved pretty much sideways in this move up, I might have to prefer an ending diagonal in this structure, or a leading diagonal for all that matters. We do have to understand that for Bitcoin there are 2 main scenarios. One of them would imply that this would be a wave 1 up, a large wave 1 up, a considerable one, yeah, from the 2018 low. We could count 5 waves up. But can we not track anything else? Well, no, we actually can. I can look at this to have potentially been a series of 1-2 setups, in which case the support levels would be significantly higher. For example, already starting at $5,600, not $100, $56,000 and $800. Yeah. We haven't reached those levels, so primarily I would still strongly expect lower prices regardless for Bitcoin. But once more, I would like to see signs of a bottom before heading headfirst into it. And given the internal structure that I currently have in place, given that the levels of support have not been reached, I do have to favor lower prices. And I am interested also, especially here at the first level of support for this interpretation, the structural support levels we have around 57,000 down to 53,000 is also interesting, then 49,000. This area could help significantly in forming a local low in the case of Bitcoin if not something even more major. And I believe the next move up could actually become a pretty substantial one. Yeah, it is extremely early to tell. It will have to take time to prove itself, and it will actually have to be given time to unfold more completely, because even though I could be looking at an extremely impulsive and strong wave 3, I'm not so certain of the cycles that everyone is tracking. I believe we could be looking at more of a sideways continued upside within the next wave 3 up, which would definitely have periods of significantly more strength, but it really might not follow the cycle, the Fourier cycle that everyone is talking about. That will be interesting, certainly, to follow. Now, in terms of the count for Bitcoin itself, so this is an actual opportunity. If you are looking to accumulate Bitcoin anyway, and you want to give it a shot as soon as this structure may form a local low, yeah, this is an actual opportunity around $57,000 here. I actually believe this is the first interesting level, at least to me. Now, in terms of the structure, well, here's the interesting part. If this would be indeed just an internal 1-2 setup here, well, we could be looking at something like an A, B, C pattern where we could form a bottom within this low very easily, actually. Yeah, everyone would be happy. Everyone would be shouting Bitcoin to new highs, Bitcoin to 1 million once more. That is valid, but if we are tracking the larger wave 1 up, this might be instead just the wave A of a significantly large wave 2 within the larger area of support we have in white for Bitcoin. So, for those reasons, I actually do not care too much of the exact count we have in this structure. I could see also a leading diagonal form within a wave A that would extend the correction it will form significantly, because even the wave A could end up taking for even the rest of the year, even significantly longer, and then it would need a wave B that could end up being quite significant, and a wave C to extend even lower before having a bottoming. And I'm sure we have a very good chance of getting an overshoot within a follow-up wave B. And in the case of an overshoot, everyone will get caught off guard, but the wave C might still come. Yeah, and we could get a quite sharp decline in the wave C afterwards. So it is pretty difficult to predict, and I'm not predicting here by any means what will happen. I am rather preparing for different scenarios, and I definitely do see a strong case for forming a local low here around the 38.2% retracement, $57,000, but we aren't there yet, are we? We haven't gotten there. So primarily, especially as long as we do not break internal levels of resistance, I would be watching out for a diagonal pattern in this structure. I'd be watching out in terms of resistance up to the 61.8% retracement around basically 70k. Yeah, if we can get a sustained break above that, does it mean that a bottom is in? Actually, not automatically. This could turn out into an A, B, C pattern where it would ultimately just build a larger A, B, C structure to still complete the correction. Without reaching these levels of support we have in white, it will be difficult to have a strong conviction of a bottom, especially as this is within a quite large time frame. Yeah. All right, a couple of more opportunities in the health sector. So health services, Centene. I have shared this setup with the newsletter exactly as it was bottoming, I believe. Yeah, I have actually also shared a video on YouTube, but that was with the Patreons, not the Patreons, the YouTube members, as not many people were interested in Centene, but this is actually a very interesting stock to me. It did present great opportunity as it had an initial 5V move to the upside. So, I have looked for the 3-wave correction into this blue support zone. The 61.8% retracement has managed to come through, and it built a very, very nice wave C in this structure. Actually, I can perfectly track every single wave we have in. Yeah, even within the wave 1, I see 5 waves down. I do see 5 waves down within the wave 3, and even in the 5th wave, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 very clearly. So I've been asked when would be a good time to look for a buy on Centene. Sorry, I was reading one of the questions. Yeah, I'll get to that in a moment. I've been asked this after this has taken off. Well, the best time to buy would have been here. It didn't actually present much of an opportunity afterwards. The next best time to buy, well, I have shared even yesterday this white area of support. It's not going to be the same high probability, the same attractive setup we have had within this as a wave 2. But I believe from these levels we can actually look for one additional high. Now, do I know that we have a top in within the wave 3? I do not, but I do strongly prefer it given how large this correction has already been. So, given that we have seen a slight reversal today, it might be the case that we will not even manage to reach the levels of support we have here for the wave 4, down starting basically at $58.30. But if it actually doesn't manage to reach those, I will still have to prefer lower or an extension within this as a wave 3. I am actually not convinced we will get more than one additional larger high in the case of this stock before having a top in within the major wave 3, but I would also still expect that additional high with decently high probability. So in the next 1 to 2 weeks, we may see this wave 4 form a bottom. It might present an opportunity that could be picked up in early July. Yeah, so the wave 3 hasn't actually reached the ideal target. I believe then the internal structure isn't clearly full either, so I do favor higher, and I do expect this region to be reached within the next high. But yes, still lower at the moment. It doesn't have strong indications of a bottom. And then HIMS, I do not remember. Yeah, we actually might still have an opportunity here. Now, this is an interesting one. It could be an opportunity for July, but that is rather assuming that the current uptrend is failing. So, in the case of HIMS, we have to prefer from a larger time frame perspective still decently strongly that the correction is not complete, that we need one additional low. The internal structure has to strongly prefer lower. It doesn't seem complete to me, and I am prepared for lower. Do I let this prevent me from looking for even higher prices? Actually, no. I am considering an opportunity as it may retrace here within a wave 2, and if it is to provide such an opportunity, I would also expect not to get a deep retracement. If I happen to see the 50% retracement broken, even though that isn't the last level of support I would typically consider for a wave 2, I do believe the momentum would be heavily affected to the point that, yeah, the orange scenario might once again come on top, or at least have and command more respect. So that was about it for the picks I have prepared for today. I hope you like them, and if you like them especially, I would appreciate you leaving a like as we head into some of the requests I have received in the chat. Yeah. I'm gonna take just a moment here. All right, are we ready? So ASPI. This is one opportunity I have shared a while ago. It seems the white scenario has simply failed. Honestly, the yellow interpretation isn't ideal either, but this is what we are left with. And given the structure that I currently see in place, I am satisfied with what I see in terms of the correction, as this orange wave C. I am looking at the structure up. I do see a potential double 1-2 setup, but at the same time, this is a sign of a potential ABC pattern up. We actually do not need to form any additional highs before extending to even lower prices. While that is true, I also see opportunity in that, because the way I see it, this is an interesting opportunity as long as the momentum is up. If we cannot build something more bullish, which in the case of this stock would be an impulse in this yellow wave C, I might not rather want to be a part of the move up, even if it happens, as it happens in, let's say, potentially an ending diagonal. It might not be the case for you, in which case you could be looking already for a position, you could be looking even for a deeper retracement. Yeah, the area of support we would consider for such a scenario would have to actually be allowed to go as low as the 78.6% retracement. This would be, again, in the idea of an ending diagonal. But what I'd rather find more interesting is that institutions are buying this stock. They have shared with us very nicely, not intentionally certainly, but they have shared with us that they have been accumulating this stock. We do see a reversal pattern. We do see an attempt to break above the previous swing high we have had in this wave B, which has caused an internal correction. Well, if I dare to look for a double 1-2 setup, I would then expect to hold significantly higher levels of support, and let's say we track this in yellow. This will be my primary scenario. I would then expect to maybe even have a bottom in, or at the very least, not see a break below $5.40, not a sustained break in any manner. So at this point, unfortunately, in the smallest of time frames, the structure isn't very indicative of a bottom. The only thing I can track here is actually another double 1-2 setup, where if I actually see a break even below $6.50, it would be the first indication of weakness. It would be the first indication of a potential reset within this wave 2. Unfortunately, this is going to be a stock that requires a lot more monitoring, because it hasn't provided a more clear, larger 1-2 setup. It did provide, for anyone who would have been actively tracking it, this as an initial wave 1 to the upside in a 5-wave pattern, which would have been a great opportunity for anyone looking for a wave 2 here. But now that we have 3 waves up, yeah, we don't have the same high odds of the initial 5 move to the upside, the initial opportunity for a breakout. So yeah, an opportunity can be had here, but I do see great risk already if this internal area of support extending down to $6.50 fails to be holding. What do you think about Nasdaq? No, we actually had a couple of questions higher. ARM. Yeah, I actually have that open, but don't I? In the case of ARM, I am tracking one scenario and one scenario alone at this point in time, and I do strongly favor for it to be working out. Do we have anything else that we can notice? No. For ARM, I actually strongly prefer higher prices, but I am also looking at the wave 4 correction to be fully in play now at the very least. So I would primarily be looking for a potential reversal from the 38.2% retracement, $398, as the initial structural support and Fibonacci retracement level hasn't managed to generate that reversal. Now, to be clear, this doesn't mean that we will actually need to get to those levels, and there are actually some even further issues to that. But this is the next opportunity that I see for a higher likelihood of a bounce. Yeah, ARM is still probably. Do you know Cyverse? I don't know who Cyverse is or what. So ARM, I still love the structure that it has generated. I am still looking at this to be a potential impulse. I do still strongly prefer higher prices within this wave 5 of the wave 3. And since I can only see 3 waves up in the worst case scenario at this point, I do have to strongly prefer further highs, at the very least one additional high. Now, can this white area of support fail? Of course it can. What can happen if it fails? Well, we could see a retracement that would allow the $371 level to be reached, the 50% retracement, in exactly the scenario where this would have been a wave 1 top, where the wave 2 would have bottomed here and the wave 3 would already have a top in. I do not favor this scenario at this point in time. And within the smaller time frame, I do see a not so ideal structure. So firstly, it has generated 3 waves down here, all nice and fun. Then it generated a 3-wave correction up. So I would have liked to see a wave C unfold. Well, that would be extremely great, except that the wave 1 would have been quite substantial, so this would have needed to be a wave 2, and the wave 3 would need to go quite low, and then I would still need a wave 4 and a wave 5 to complete the structure. Does this mean that we will be visiting the 50% retracement here? Not automatically. It is still possible for this wave 4 to be building a more complex WXY pattern. Yeah? Now, we can actually maybe have a brief look at even the internal structure here. So, in terms of the move down, right now I prefer lower. What patterns could I track in terms of the structure down? I could look for this to be an A, B, C. And once again, to be clear, this could be a wave 3. We could see significantly lower prices, although in the case of a wave 3, I'm not sure the support levels would manage to hold. They might, but I'm not so sure about that. So yeah, I'm considering a possible A, B, C, but also the scenario where the wave B would have been a triangle, in which case it would have topped, it would have formed the end of it, it would have completed the correction at this point, right? So in this scenario, yeah, I'd probably consider something like a 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 5, and it might not even reach the 38.2% retracement I was talking about in this interpretation. But if we want to also look at some ideal targets for the wave C, we of course have to consider a couple of them, as there are 2 possible outcomes. It would either be the 100% extension at $401, or the $393.94 level, still at the 100% extension. And as you know, it is an ideal target. It doesn't need to get there. And I'm not looking anyway to buy the falling knife here, especially if I see the move down accelerating. No. I would like to see the move down start smoothing out, start getting more horizontal as it reaches the structural support and the Fibonacci retracement at 38.2% retracement. Again, $398. This is an extremely interesting level. If the move down doesn't have a lot of strength as it pushes lower and lower, I believe there is a good chance we will see a stronger bounce. Let's take a look at Encore Energy. So this stock has managed to generate that additional low I would have liked to see within this white wave 2. I believe the bottom could be in, but I'm of course tracking the next levels of resistance because I want to see evidence. I want to see the levels of resistance broken, not because I want to see lower prices still within this orange interpretation. Then if I go into the smaller time frame, I might rather argue that I would like for a bottom to be in. I do not care for even further lows, but I do have to accept that this wave 4 would have gotten rejected exactly at the 38.2% retracement, which is the ideal target for the wave 4. What is there to do now? We have to be patient, but if we are looking to trade this stock, I believe staying maybe even on a daily time frame here is going to be crucial. It is a small cap stock, it is a small company, and you will not generally get the same nice patterns you get within higher volume stocks, more very frequently traded stocks, as within you're not going to get the same structures that will show you a bottom in this one the same you would on the others. I got distracted again by reading one of the messages. Credo Technology. So this is a very interesting one. It managed to form a stronger move to the upside than I would have actually liked for this stock, for this structure. I would have actually liked to see one more high within this white wave 1. It didn't manage to get that. No, it seems as if it wants to break out within the wave 3 in a much more direct fashion, where the wave 1 would have needed to top here, which is a technical possibility, but I don't really like this scenario too much. I don't have to like it, however. So in terms of support and in terms of opportunities, I believe they could be had as long as the 50% retracement holds here. So only in the scenario where this either builds a wave 3 in an impulse, or if it builds a series of 1-2 setups but then it has shallow retracements, would I trust it to continue higher? The current levels are extremely interesting, I believe. If we want to look at an even smaller time frame, an ABC pattern, I would be looking for an opportunity relatively soon. I would be looking for a bottom to potentially form, probably within a wave 4 and a wave 5 once this move down is complete. Now, for those of you wondering, what are we actually tracking on a larger time frame here? It's not exactly important. That's why I haven't necessarily been hinting too much at this idea, but it could be a series of 1-2 setups where the next move up could be quite massive. We could be looking at easily even a 3x. I believe that is a possibility if this structure is to follow through, and it is a fragile one, but the momentum is preferring it, at least at this point in time, at least as long as the 50% retracement down to $284 is still holding. What else is there? Netflix, maybe we can take a look, but I believe I shared a video update on this one, and nothing has really changed since. We only see a stronger move down within the wave 3, and this wouldn't change much for me. I would definitely be waiting for the wave 4 for a larger correction before I get a better idea of what we can expect of this one. What else? Nasdaq. This is not the chart I usually cover, right? I don't have any notations here. So for Nasdaq, it's interesting. we could be looking at various different scenarios to actually be working out. Primarily, I would have even considered for this to be possible, to be a wave 5, yeah, in a 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 5. But given the strength and the momentum of this structure, we could be looking at a lot more, and this will all end up playing into what is really happening geopolitically. Yeah, what is happening in the macroeconomics will heavily affect what can really happen to the Nasdaq, because the dollar is it's not looking necessarily favorable. It is gaining, but the inflation is actually much stronger, and I believe that will have to play a big role in that. And with all of that said, even if a lot of companies will be evaluated higher and higher, we would need to consider and focus on the fact that if the AI expectations don't pan out exactly as it is planned, we might see the big companies start to decrease in value. Google, Meta have already issued massive amounts of shares. Google has just announced, I believe, an 85 billion share mint. Yeah, they're basically diluting their investors. Just all of that just to fund all of the AI expenses. So if these companies start getting into trouble, if they cannot keep up the spending, and if AI cannot argue for that spending to have been lucrative, to have been a positive outcome, or the outcome that is expected, we could see a massive decline on both of the indexes, while not necessarily looking at an extremely bearish stock market. We could actually have, how should I call it? We could actually have several opportunities still very much present while the indexes are tanking heavily. So I would generally watch the macro events as opposed to tracking more of a count in terms of Nasdaq. But if you're really interested in looking for the uptrend in the case of the indexes, this low that just formed here, when was this? On the 9th of June? It is extremely important to hold. If we can use this as a base for a double 1-2 setup, or not even a double, yeah, maybe a double here, 1-2, 1-2, the market could actually extend much, much higher, but it is getting to a point of significant risk, and many of the stocks are starting to present signs of a more substantial top, of a potentially larger correction to be coming, which I'm not necessarily so sure that will allow this move up to pan out. But certainly, I would definitely wait for evidence. The structure could actually be counted in so many different ways that it will have been a greater benefit to look at individual stocks, I believe. And yeah, the same story will end up being true for the S&P 500. It is a similar structure. And I do prefer for this to have been a wave 5. It is generating that one additional high I would have preferred. Last week I remember people were asking me, what can I expect of this correction? Do I still see it going higher? And yes, I did see it going higher. I do see it to possibly still go higher, but frankly, I do not use that as a metric for opportunities. What's my bottom for SanDisk? For me, I believe it is actually very, very far from a bottom. I would still be looking for this structure to be extending directly higher. So even if the internal setup fails, and I believe I have shared an update on SanDisk a couple of days ago, Yeah, maybe yesterday, maybe 2 days ago, during the weekend, I believe. As long as we cannot fail holding even internal levels of support, I wouldn't even think of a bottom. Yeah, and the higher it goes, the higher the bottom of the next larger correction move will have to be. And given the structure that has actually formed in this move up, we could be looking at extremely severe extensions for this stock, because while initially I would have liked to look at this and say, okay, this is a wave 3, this would have been a perfect example of a wave 3, the next move up is actually even stronger. So at this point in time, even if this ends up being a wave 5, I do find there to be a very good chance of this instead being a 1-2 setup. Now, if we want to take a look at the next large level of support I would consider, it would likely have to... It's actually quite difficult to say, actually, yeah, because I believe the blue structure is playing out, so I believe this wave 5 is seeing an extension, or it is playing out as an actual wave 3. But yeah, if I were to look for the deepest level of support I could for this structure, it would be around $1,200 indeed. I would have to allow it, however, to provide more evidence from a smaller time frame perspective. The structure is still overwhelmingly bullish, no sign of a top that I can see. Sivers. Oh, yeah, another impressive one. I've actually never heard about this one. I don't even know what this exchange this is on. I don't even know what currency that is using. Wait, why does it not... Yeah, so I'm not exactly sure of what this exchange is, what this currency is, but I would definitely be looking out for further upside in case of this stock. Yeah, I would be watching out possibly for even a double 1-2 setup here, and for this to potentially be a wave 3 top. I would definitely watch out, however, for a top to be in within this as a wave 3, and for the wave 4 correction to potentially materialize relatively soon. So yeah, here, extremely interesting at the $59.5 level. Then the 38.2% retracement, also extremely interesting. We have structural support at both of these regions, and yes, I can favor at the very least one more major high in the case of this stock. It could end up being a quite extended one, but I would be prepared, however, once this is in, for a potentially quite large correction. Yeah, consider, actually give me a moment. Yeah, we did reach the ideal target, but consider how large this wave 2 has been. It's taken a year to materialize. Well, similarly, I could expect a similar outcome of the larger wave 4, potentially even longer. So yes, for now, as long as we do not get a sustained break below the 50% retracement, I have to favor higher, and if this wave 3 extends even higher, I would have to readjust these levels of support, but I would definitely not be too inclined to look into an opportunity within the smaller time frame with what is happening here, and the move up doesn't seem particularly interesting anyway. Yeah, the structure is extremely corrective. What else? SMR. Yeah, this one, very interestingly, has failed to hold the internal levels of support. Now, does this mean that it has failed completely? No, especially given that the move it has generated higher afterwards is already decently substantial. It did get a nice bounce. but I also wouldn't be particularly trusting of it because I can already track this as an A, B, C pattern complete, and the trend can resume to lower prices. I actually want to get through the other stocks as well, the other requests, so we cannot go into the large time frame here and do or redo a full analysis. But yes, the path lower is still present, and it might not happen, to be honest, because even though this nuclear stock has failed to hold the internal levels of support, the others haven't. Yeah, Centrus Energy still very nice and well. Oklo, very nice and well. I don't remember about the nano-nuclear energy, but this one is also holding still. Yeah, it has probably the worst structure out of all of them. I don't really like it, but it's still holding support. It hasn't managed to perform a lower low, and if I were to draw here the 78.6% retracement, it wouldn't have been even touched. So I believe we could still be looking at the bottom. I believe we could still be looking for higher, but I would definitely watch out for internal resistance for this one. Yeah, lower prices, very much a high threat, but the break above $13 would start to shift those expectations. Yeah, this would start improving the odds of a bottom. What else? Yeah, CLS. Yeah, impressive structure, I have to admit. Well, this is an interesting one. I would definitely have to look at this potentially building a 5V move to the upside in an impulse. Unfortunately, the structure may not be as clear. It could be that wave 3 would have just formed a more substantial pop. So this one, certainly in a very high risk area. For me, in terms of opportunity, I might have to allow a retracement that would only start being interesting around $194.40. Yeah? Could it be that a different count would be unfolding in the end and that we get directly higher prices? It is possible. Looking for signs of a bottom, as I always share them, we look at structures starting to lose momentum to the downside. Yeah, maybe seeing some slope, and maybe we get a bit more of a choppy movement, and then we form a more substantial low, and then we start seeing an initial 5 move to the upside. Those are always good signs of a bottom potentially forming. But I would still have to look for the large retracement to potentially materialize. Now, if I wanted to look for an even closer opportunity, or to look for an exit because I would have been part of this rally all along and I simply don't know when to look for a potential exit, when would this opportunity start looking significantly worse? Well, I would definitely watch for internal levels of support here, where if this doesn't work out at the very least as a 1-2 setup, I would have to prepare for a larger correction to materialize. I might even be looking in some cases only down to the 50% retracement. This has already been achieved, and I do actually have to prefer that it builds an ABC pattern here, a larger correction. So I would definitely consider, at the very least, allowing the 78.6% retracement to happen. And since it has seen such a sharp decline and such a weak move up, I do strongly prefer one additional low within this correction. Could it bottom at this swing low? A very good level in my opinion. But again, might be better to look for some confirmations here. Alibaba, yeah. Oh, it's been a while since I've been taking a look at this one. So this I wanted to allow a potential 1-2 setup. Can I really trust it? No. Honestly, I'll just start the count from the low. I'll start looking for the move up to potentially materialize from the current levels, but I do warn you, didn't want to do that. I do warn you that I see 5 waves down, I see 3 waves up. So while it did extend higher since my last update, the pressure for even lower prices is huge. Yeah, I might still allow this to work out into one additional high, but I do deem it not necessary. I can already track 5 waves up within a wave C of this wave 2. And yeah, in terms of support, I suppose we could maybe look down to the 61.8% retracement, which is exactly where it just bounced off. Yeah, if it can maybe generate one additional high from these levels, it could see a reset within this orange wave 2, but the threat is still massive. Then what else? What does it need to do for the white scenario to actually work out? Well, unfortunately, I would probably still have to look for a leading diagonal, but in that case, the wave 4 correction would need to become significantly larger. So I might be able to allow a slightly deeper retracement, but it's still not a stock that I find promising. I do generally see an extremely high threat here. The structure down, not ideal. I could see a case for this even being, what is this? Like, yeah, probably a leading diagonal itself in a 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 5. In which case, within this wave C of the wave 3, I would have to look internally for a 5-wave structure down. So plenty of pressure for even lower prices. And in terms of resistance that I could track here locally, I would actually have to allow a pretty high one, the 78.6% retracement at $127. Because I believe this structure down could work out either as a double 1-2 setup, and then this would be the wave 3 and we get a double 4-5 structure, or it could be just an ABC pattern within the wave 1, we get a wave 2, and then an ABC pattern within the wave 3, and so on. So significant threat here. I would most likely stay away from this stock, especially as the momentum is very aggressively down. Yeah, let's do a couple of more. I actually need to go in about 10 minutes, but thank you for joining me. Yeah, let's do Enphase Energy smaller time frame. In the case of this structure, I do see the possibility of a double 1-2 setup to have materialized here. I personally don't like the structure too much, but I also do not concern myself with the smaller time frame. I am actually personally quite content with the opportunity that we have had here to look for a position after a bounce from the last level of support. If it happens to build a very choppy structure higher, I will probably prefer to allow it. I would give it a bit more time before I would assume even a top within a correction to be in, as within the structure down, I believe it to be likely to either have a 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 5, in which case I would expect an ABC pattern within a wave 2, something like that. We can even track some resistance levels for that, and they would only start at $56. And then if I want to track a 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 5, I would typically expect a slightly larger wave 4. So for now, I actually prefer higher, and I would take the time to evaluate when I should be looking to get out sooner than I am already looking, which is around the 50% retracement. Only after I start to see more evidence. I have actually been considering not even taking this trade, this chance, as yeah, I do see the possibility of this being a 5-wave pattern down complete. But even then, yeah, I believe we can look for higher prices at the very least at this point in time still. Yeah, here I was sharing some updates about ARM a moment ago. Finally, we start to see a bit more strength. We start to see the potential of forming a bit of a bottom, right? Very interesting. I will keep a close eye on that. I really like ARM. What it's doing right now, it's actually really nice. From a larger time frame perspective, I strongly believe in the uptrend, as the levels of support have been holding out religiously, and that's the fun part with Elliott Wave. The more they work, the more faith you can have in them continuing to work, because once you identify the correct structure, the correct count, these tend to just add up and provide pretty good opportunities with pretty good odds of actually continuing to work out. Yeah, what else? SEC. This is actually the last one, I believe. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, a very interesting one. So unfortunately, the move up, not the most clear one. Can I track this potentially as a wave 3? Not really. So yeah, theoretically, I could be looking at this to be a 5-wave move to the upside. I do not really trust it particularly much. I do see, however, the fact that I have 3 waves down, and this could mean, even if a broader failure occurs, that we may see a bounce once this 3rd wave is down. It might happen simply to not have uncertainty, which is usually lacking in markets. Is not always the case, but yeah, I don't consider this as an opportunity. This structure, I believe, is actually quite far from a bottom. The momentum, extremely aggressive down, and I do see room for potentially a few additional lows. Do they need to happen? Absolutely not. I can actually look at for divergence, and it is showing up. It is already decent, but it could still be that this wave 3 would still be ongoing lower. That in the case of this structure, I would still have to watch out for plenty of resistance before having a more substantial bottoming. And even if this works out as a 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 5, even if this works out as a 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 5, in which case the wave 3, the large wave 3 would be complete, resistance would still be present. But I would certainly primarily prefer directly lower prices against $16.17. 70 cents, not 17. I'm not sure how that came out. But yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 5. Certainly a large threat, especially as we notice it has already gotten rejected at the first level of resistance, also in line with structural resistance. But yes, I would still primarily favor lower. It might attempt to form a local bottom around this region, around $11.40, but I do not believe it will manage to stop this very strong move down. Yeah. What else? HIMS. We already covered that earlier in the live stream. I unfortunately did forget to note down everything. 1 to actually do the timeline for the video. Might have to go back through the live stream to do that. The trade desk. This is not a favorite of mine. I really liked the opportunity it did provide with this initial move to the upside, but ever since it failed to hold the internal levels of support, it's been in a massive downtrend, and I have also gone through this yesterday maybe, or maybe earlier today, I actually do not remember. The wave 4 would be expected. The wave 3 could very easily still extend lower, so primarily I wouldn't get my hopes up for this to manage to form a bottom too soon. I will be looking for better signs of a bottom, maybe a bottoming structure, maybe the momentum at the very least decreasing, and then potentially an initial 5V move to the upside, yeah, some strength, some momentum actually building up instead of breaking down or increasing to lower prices. What else do we have? Yeah, so I'm actually about to head out. I do have 5 or more minutes. Let me think if we have anything else we can maybe go through before we end the live stream. I have shared SMR. I did SMR about 10 minutes ago. Hood, has it done anything since the last update? Yes, it generated that one additional high I was looking for. So, yeah, it might not be exactly an ideal structure, to be honest. But primarily, it seems to be following through this idea of potentially a diagonal structure. Do I prefer it? It's... yeah, to be honest, not one of my favorite stocks, but the next levels of support to watch out for would definitely extend down to $95, and if we cannot hold this level, if we get a sustained break below it, it's definitely a large warning sign that a more substantial bottom or a more substantial top would be in, and that the overall correction would still be expected to extend even more, yeah, this yellow wave 4. And again, as I shared even in the last update, it is possible for more bullish patterns to emerge, but even within those, I would still primarily like and expect for this support zone to be holding. Without it, I would probably be looking for new signs of bottom, yeah? For example, if we form a lower low, yeah, a push below this area of support, I might be looking for signs of a bottom, some reversal pattern, some initial 5 move to the upside to indicate that the bottom is actually in. And yeah, for now, we will actually stop here. I do need to go out. Thanks to everyone for joining in, and yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.